Hey guys, I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Hopefully I can make it a little bit better with this video, so let's see if I can do that. We're starting things out with Batcow. I wish I could have painted this sooner. What I mean by that is, I actually really wanted to paint Batcow on April 1st. That would have been hilarious, but it just didn't work out. I didn't get the game in time and whatnot. But, would have been perfect for April 1st, I feel. This was such a decisive miniature during the Kickstarter, but I'll tell you what, I think it's a lot of fun, and, it's actually a lot of fun to paint too. So before we get into this, just real quick, as always, if you do enjoy the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. That helps the channel more than you know. It helps the video more than you know. The algorithm loves when you do that. So, also, I would want to know what else to paint. So I'm kind of running out of my first draft here. I only have one more video that I had pre-planned, and it's actually available on my Patreon for early access over there. So if you want to see that, head over in that direction. Otherwise, comment below and let me know what you would like to see me paint. Now, let's get started. Alright, so starting things out with Uniform Gray on the base. You've seen me do this on all of the bases here, though not at first. So I don't remember if I mentioned it in a comment, responding to you guys as I always do, or if I actually mentioned it within the video, but I'm going to try and actually start doing the bases, or at least the base coat of the base, as soon as possible, preferably almost first thing. Not so I work from the bottom up. I don't typically work that way. I work from recessed points and then go out, into outer layers here. Typically, I'll also sometimes keep in mind if it's a light color versus a dark color on what I paint first. Ideally, you actually paint the light colors first, and then are very careful on the dark colors, because it's very hard to paint the light on top of the dark, but if you mess up on the light, it's easy to cover up with a darker color. So, in following suit with that, we're starting with white here. Now, yes, I did prime the miniature white, and you guys actually, a few of you noticed in my review of the game, in that video, I showed Batcow briefly as an example and a tease, and you were picking up that, yes, it was indeed primed. So, there you go. You guys guessed it, and I can't pull a fast one on you, I guess. Anyway, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I also chose Batcow as like the hero piece in the review too, so I used Batcow multiple times in there, just kind of hinting at it. For the white, getting back onto the miniature, you're gonna paint kind of the pretty much most of the head. In fact, you could paint all of the head. It doesn't matter if you do it over this mask here and the nose and all that kind of stuff. A little bit of the neck, and then the insides of all four legs. But then otherwise, and the star, but I didn't do the star yet. And that's because the Batcow is shown in two different ways, with a white star and then also with a white outline on the star. And I went with the white star eventually. Now this is orange-brown. I also needed two coats for this, just like I needed two coats for the white. Yes, even after priming in white, I needed two coats. I primed pretty light, and so it's just kind of a light dusting, so it's not pure white, which is also why I painted it. And this orange-brown is going on the mask. It's going on the ridges of the ear, part way down the ears, and then pretty much the back half of the miniature. Now, what you're going to see me do, and I do this often, I do this typically with capes. You saw me do it with Damien's cape, for instance. You'll see me do it again here on Batcow's cape. But I essentially trace an outline, and then I fill in the rest with a much thicker brush. And to me, it just saves a bit of time, reloading the brush with paint and, how many swipes I'm doing. I'm doing a little bit of blending, by the way, here, but it's just giving it an irregular shape. I'm not too concerned about really blending the two. I'm not doing like a wet blending or anything like that I would normally do, or a glaze if I was trying to like super blend it. I actually want it a little rough. I just don't want a straight line down. You don't want to see brush marks. Now I have the bigger brush out, and as you can see, I'm being still a little bit careful around the star. I actually thought about doing this with my regiment brush versus the monster brush I have here now by Army Painter. Link in the description below for all of my brushes, by the way. I'm a huge fan of them, but this one's nice because I can, as you can see, it's still a nice brush, so I can get nice clean lines while also, covering it really quick, which is always really nice too. Emperor's Children out. Anytime I get to say Emperor's Children and show that I'm painting in pink, it just brings a smile to my face, It's just kind of a fun, a fun situation there. This is for the nose, which is well defined on the mini, so that's good. In fact, this mini was actually really, really good. A little bit of cleanup mold line wise, but otherwise perfectly fine. And then I'm also going to do the udders. Now, obviously, because I've already painted the white, I'm going to be kind of careful here. Same here. You got to be very careful because you've already painted the legs. That being said, the pink, you can cover it with orange-brown. No problem. I mean, if there's ever a mistake, you're fine. Typically, by the way, if you do a mistake, you can get the brush wet real quick, like rinse out all the paint, keep it wet, and then just, you know, dab it on the mistake. And that'll keep it wet, and then you dry your brush and you can soak up that water and whisk it away, and typically you get it pretty darn close to as if it had never happened, which is good. Obviously you're going to do the sides. It's a little hard to reach underneath the mini, by the way, but it is doable. It's possible. I thought about not even mentioning it because it wasn't a super hard point for me. Okay, chocolate brown is going to be used in two different things here. First of all, the collar that's holding the bell, because you got to have cowbell, obviously. And then also I'm using it on the hooves. Now, obviously, you can do lighter hooves or darker hooves, depending on what you want it to do. And then also, obviously, you can do different colors if you don't want to reuse a color. The more colors you add, obviously, typically the better. So in other words, as long as there's not, if they're two different browns that are both dark, then that's fine. And I'm just trying to be a little bit faster here, so chocolate brown on both. Screaming Skull out for the horns. Now, these horns are really small, and so I don't actually do the Agrax Earthshade and highlight that I typically do. I've rethought that a little bit here, and in fact, probably after the video, at some point, I'm lying to myself here, I'm never going to touch this miniature again with paint, but I'm going to tell myself that I would actually either blackline the, where the horn comes out of the head, or add an Agrax Earthshade wash and let it pool there to kind of darken there. Might just differentiate it a little bit from the white. Nuln oil out for the base. You guys have seen me do the base several times now. You know how it is. This is a new base design though. This is like a more like a tile layout, right? Where it's a whole bunch of squares versus kind of the craggy bases I think all of my other miniatures have happened to have. So just kind of interesting there. Now, don't freak out. This is Seraphim Sepia, and it's on the white. It's going to look like you ruined it, but you didn't, or at least I didn't. So I did not water it down. I have done that in the past before. So you can actually water down a wash, just like you would anything else. And what it is it's stretching out that pigment across a bigger surface area, right? And so it just kind of helps it be a little bit lighter. That being said, what I end up doing here is pretty heavy because I'm going to be a little aggressive on the highlights, but I still want those shadows to do it. I'm going to be blacklining this anyway, just like I did Damian Wayne, and so you're going to see that it actually ends up quite well, and I didn't have too much of a problem with it. I thought about doing it a little bit lighter, but nope, just went normal amount. Now we're gonna just do all these washes in a row here. So Reikland Fleshshade for the orange brown that we did earlier. Now the orange brown's kind of nice because you could shift it several different ways. If you wanted a darker miniature, just do Agrax Earthshade instead. It's a much darker brown than this. I wanted to do the Reikland Fleshshade to keep it as close as possible to that original color, and the Reikland Fleshshade is a little kind of a red light brown. You could have done Seraphim Sepia on this too, and it would have been a little bit brighter orange. It would have almost looked like a yellow wash, I feel, if I had put it on here, because it's a little bit brighter. It's a very tan kind of orangey sepia kind of looking color, right? A little bit of light brown in there. And then obviously Carroburg Crimson on the udders and the nose. You really want it to pool on the underside of the udders if you can. Easier said than done. And then obviously in the nostrils here. Now this is not white. Now we're painting with white here, and again this is just going to be a fairly heavy highlight. So I am going to cover most of the miniature, including the recesses. You're just, kind of go a bit more heavy-handed here. But as you can see, it's not perfectly white, and she shouldn't be perfectly white. I mean, she's a cow. She's going to be a little dirty, right? And it just adds a little bit more life into it, I feel. If you just do pasty white, it's going to look kind of clown-like, kind of jokerish, if you know what I mean, a little bit painted on. The star I kept actually fairly bright though. I put I think 2 coats on this, just because I wanted that star to really pop, because it's a fun star, and in fact once we blackline it, it's gonna really pop. It's gonna look great. Okay, now I've added a little bit of white into that orange brown, and this is going to be a highlight. It's not going to be that extreme highlight, that cartoon highlight that you've seen me do, and that's for 2 reasons. First of all, I'm going to be essentially adding a quote-unquote texture here, but I'm not like hardcore doing it. where I'm trying to make it look like there's strokes within it. If you want to do that, one way to do it is to not water down your paint and get a fine tip brush and just do individual strokes. And that'll kind of create a ridge between the strokes that will allow you to see the strokes a lot better. If you wanted to do a fur kind of look here, I wanted to give a basic shape. And so, like her stomach coming out, I wanted these kind of dashes and at angles as if her stomach is coming out. Because, I mean, it is, but this is accentuating that. So, kind of here towards, her tail and her backside here, I'm just putting them kind of a line down and kind of just a quarter down the backside, just to kind of, again, give it that shape, any parts that are popping out. The black lining is going to contrast with this really well, and so it's going to look pretty good here. I'm very happy with how it turned out, because it's kind of how I was trying to go about it. But you could do this several different ways, depending on how realistic you're trying to do, depending on how cartoony you're trying to make it look. Just kind of play around with it. And now the black lining. So we got black out, and first things first, we got to do that mask, right? Just because I think that's such a important part of the miniature. I also feel that the mask shows up much better once I actually black lined it out. I was actually kind of impressed with how much that makes it kind of pop in a good way. It also allows me to add some eye definition, and so that's good too. Now, I'm not going to show you the entire process here because this is the longest part of the entire miniature if you go this route. I do that tuft on her head. I do ridges, any kind of crease I see on her body, on her neck, a nice thick line around the collar here. The reason I went a little bit thicker here was actually on purpose because the collar is already so dark. I felt if I did a thin black line like with the mask, it wouldn't really be that noticeable, and I wanted it to kind of be noticeable. It also, I think, in my mind, helps draw attention to the head, and then with the cape, acts as almost like a black background, so that's really what you're focused on there, in my opinion. But anyway, we're going to do the front and back of the collar, where the brown, the red, orange, and the white meet. You're going to do that. All these ridges down here, the mouth. I'm not going to... Again, you can't see the bottom of the miniature, but I do as best I can to get up to that point, and so that... as far as you can see, it's aligned under there, but obviously, if you were to actually cut her off the base, there's not going to be really any black lines there. Like, that angle that you just saw is probably about as close as you can get to seeing underneath, and you're certainly not going to get a brush with any kind of, detail work under there. So again, most of the ridges are here, and so I'm actually going to add some, kind of like those highlights I did on her skin, some little swoops, some dashes. You'll see those later on the body. That's probably the most freehand portion of this, because there isn't actually a ridge there. I'm just kind of showing shape. Now that we still have that black out, let's go ahead and, now this is again with the monster brush here, let's go ahead and do this cape. Now this cape is solid black top and bottom, so it's a pretty quick thing to do, which is nice. You're going to see though that still, because that collar is painted, I'm going to do a little bit of an outline even with this brush, just because I'm going to be a little bit more careful here. And then once I get past that shoulder, then I'm just gonna paint it real quick, and it goes really quick then. Again, same thing on the underside. I'm gonna kind of be very careful around here, and then once I get away from the painted portion, I'm just gonna slather it on the rest. And so it's kind of like really slowing down and doing that 10%, and that's 90% of your time, and then the remaining 90% is 10% of your time, right? Because then you're just slathering on the black paint. But you definitely want to be a little careful here. Now, believe it or not, even with this black, I needed 2 coats in some spots with this white primer. It goes to show how much the primer actually affects the color if you only do 1 coat. Now next up is Gritty Gold. This is for her kind of cowbell here. It's kind of nice. I like that it's gold because it kind of goes with that orange theme we have, even with the Seraphim Sepia and that white. It doesn't pop out too much. I'm not going to paint a bat symbol on that, so I didn't feel confident doing it, especially at that scale. Next up, we have Ash Gray as a highlight for the base. You've seen me do this a few times before. Just to reiterate, a very, very little bit of paint here. And actually, to get on this texture for this base, I actually had to kind of press kind of hard, which was, and really get it on the side of the brush, because again, there's barely any paint here. I mean, barely any. If I was just to lightly brush the skin, it probably wouldn't even show up. So, just a tiny bit. Now, we didn't highlight the nose or the udders or anything like that, so let's add a little bit of white into that Emperor's Children and do so. And I'm actually going to do this in 2 phases. Part of it's actually not the nose. The nose I felt I could do in one drastic one, but those udders there. I wanted it to blend a little bit because it's just smooth thing, you know, the smooth, not texture, but shape. All the way down, bending away from the light. And so a little bit of blending here, but again, I wanted a stark blend, if that makes any sense. I didn't want to, you know, really do, again, a realistic blend, like a wet blend or a glaze or something like that to really make it stand out. And instead, just did it in like steps like that. Now we're also going to add white to that chocolate brown, and guys, we're actually almost done here. This was a pretty easy miniature. I finished it in a day, which is not something I always do, so I was pretty happy with that. So a lot on the top right there where it meets, and then kind of a line on the back side of it is what I did, because I imagined a light kind of coming from 45 degrees towards the side, this side, almost kind of where the camera is now, but higher. If you wanted it coming towards the front, it should probably be on the front of the collar instead of the back. Though you could do front and back and make it seem like it's kind of dipped in a little bit. That would work too. You know, I'm trying to explain how light works, and I don't know. Alright, so now that we've washed the bell, we're going to add a little bit of white to the black. I did not get black gray or anything like that. This is just a custom mix and then heavily watered down. You can actually see it's very watered down. So when it dries, it'll be a little bit better. A little bit better blended. And then I'm going to do something I didn't do on Damien's cape that I think works really well with these black capes, especially with if you want to give it a little bit of texture. So that's coming up here real soon. But first I am going to kind of try and slightly pop out those highlights, slightly blend it a little bit. And actually the most important part is right here, where I'm actually going to add a little bit on kind of the upper ridges of it. And that just gives it a little bit of shape, a little bit of volume to the eye, so it's not just this black abyss. Now we got the ash gray out again, very lightly brushed, and you can see how lightly I'm touching it. It's just kind of like a feather, like I'm trying to tickle the cape with the brush is really what I'm doing here. But if you notice, it just gets on those edges, including some of the edges on the inner part, and it gives these little lines to it because I have actually watered down the paintbrush. I forget the term. Somebody told me once, and sadly I don't remember what it's called. Like overbrushing, I think it's called, where you use a really wet brush. In other words, it's very watered down, and then again very lightly brushing here, and then a little bit on the inside, but it gives it a good texture and it just helps it pop out that little bit, especially in those really deep ridges around the neck. Now I'm actually using Shining Silver to highlight this gold. If you didn't know already, you can add a little bit of silver, and what it does is it'll really make it look like it's reflecting there, which is very nice. Additionally, you can also use silver to make it look like it's been kind of corroded, depending on how much you put there and how noticeable it is. Next up, Batcow is of course a hero, and so she gets Void Shield Blue, my apologies, for the rim, just like all of my heroes. It's a pretty close one-to-one match to the blue of the miniatures themselves, and works in the game quite well. Alright, here she is. This is Batcow, ready to kick butt, or whatever it is that she does. I don't know how OP she is. On her hero sheet it shows that she recovers X. I'm assuming that's explained in the scenario, but it sounds pretty exciting. Let me know what you think about the black lining, about the white, about the cape, and that technique there. Again, if you enjoyed this video and you didn't before, I hopefully gave you about 20 minutes of entertainment here, if nothing else, while I don't know if you laughed at me or just enjoyed seeing it come together. Either way, thumbs up for that. I always appreciate it. Comment below, what would you like for me to paint next? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to actually do like a legit vote for a future painting video, this is for Limbo Eternal War. I got some minis there, and I'm wanting to have my patrons pick that, so you can head over in the description to the link to my Patreon to vote for that, as well as see the next painting video nice and early, several days early, so that, you know, just as a little reward there. Among other things, you can win miniature painting stuff and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, Batcow, all done. Now, checked that off the bucket list. There's only one more that I have super planned next. Let me know what I paint next. Alright guys, that's all I have for today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon.